They say the coral reefs are going to die if the earth gets warmer. The only reason the coral reefs are not more extensive in their range is because the sea got colder. It's all a crock. I wish they would listen to people who actually know something about this planet. The truth is the Coral Triangle, the warmest ocean in the world, has the highest biodiversity, and it's basically a sanctuary where the coral range and species has shrunk down to the only place left that is able to support that many species of corals and reef fish because it is the warmest place left on the earth.
All right, guys, welcome back to Yanasa TV's As a Man Thinketh. Love him or hate him, our guest today is a man who is no stranger to controversy. As a doctor of ecology from the University of British Columbia, and he actually has an honorary doctorate of science from NC State University. Patrick Moore has been on both the front lines of the environmental movement, and he has, some would say he's been on the front lines of the opposite side. However, I would argue that as an ecologist, Patrick Moore takes a realistic standpoint to science, and the things and points that he has to say will really make you think about our environment, our climate, and what impacts we make that are good and what impacts we make that are bad. He's not saying that all of our impacts are beneficial. Patrick Moore has a lot of great insight on this subject, and so I asked him to come on to the show to kind of help share some of that insight with you guys and help people start to see things from a perspective. Not all scientists agree with some sort of consensus out there. And I think that the more you listen to different people with doctorate degrees and real PhDs, the more you'll start to hear differences of opinion on this subject. And they're all very educated. I like Patrick Moore's opinion on some things. He and I don't agree on everything, but like I've said before on our channel, that's not what this is about. This is about helping people start to think for themselves, and we're not going to do that unless we hear the whole conversation. So welcome to the show, Patrick Moore. So is man-made global warming actually destroying coral reefs? It seems like coral reefs they thrive in warmer environments. So as the ocean warms, the coral reefs would spread and thrive more. Of course, there's another argument that CO2 actually causes toxification of the ocean water. But when we look back in history, like during the reptilian era of dinosaurs, when we look at the parts per million of CO2 during that time frame, they were substantially higher, 3 to 4 times higher than they are today. And global temperatures were substantially higher than they are today. And yet, from my understanding, coral reefs far exceed even, that period of time that we're able to research to. Coral reefs have been around for much longer than that. So is global warming in itself actually being destructive to coral reefs? Obviously, other man-made activities, drilling into coral reefs is going to be destructive to coral reefs, boating too much around coral reefs. But is global warming, is there really a toxification of the oceans that is destroying these coral reefs?
I wish they would listen to people who actually know something about this planet, because I've been all over this earth and I've seen it from the sky and I've seen it from boats and I've seen it underwater. I've dived the islands of Indonesia on two-week expeditions, snorkeling the whole place. It's called the Coral Triangle. They say the coral reefs are going to die if the earth gets warmer. The only reason the coral reefs are not more extensive in their range is because the sea got colder coming into this Pleistocene ice age. The Caribbean, for example, is the second warmest ocean in the world. The warmest is the oceans of Indonesia. And the reason those two places are the warmest oceans in the world is they're both protected from the north and the south by the incursion of cold water. Indonesia is Australia below, huge landmass, and South Asia above. The Caribbean is North America above and South America below. So they get to heat up, and they have sun all year in the tropics. The Caribbean has lost 50% of its coral species since the 50 million year cooling period came into effect. Half the species are gone because they couldn't stand it getting cooler. The Coral Triangle, Indonesia, has the highest biodiversity of corals in the entire world, over 600 species. And the soft corals, which are not found in many places, they're not rigid like most corals are. They're actually wave in the sea. They are extensive there too. It has the highest biodiversity of reef fishes too. This is all in my book. So in fact, the Coral Triangle is a sanctuary for corals and reef fish and many other species because it's the warmest ocean in the world left. It used to be that much more of the oceans were warmer and coral was distributed much further. You may notice there's no coral in Finland or England or Canada or even Japan because it needs at least subtropical water. Where I have my place in Mexico is just about as far north as corals come on southern Baja. There's a few further north, but Baja is the only east coast on the west coast of the Americas that's in the tropics because it has a coast on the east side and then the mainland of Mexico. So the whole Sea of Cortez is protected from the prevailing westerly winds from the Pacific, whereas nowhere else in the tropics, virtually nowhere else in the tropics, maybe there's a little island somewhere, but it's an 800-mile long peninsula that protects the inside waters. And so the largest coral reef in the Americas is in front of our home in Cabo Pulmo, where there's only about 200 people. It's a wonderful place. It's north of Los Cabos. Everybody should go there, but there's a restriction now on the number of people that can dive per day because it's a federal national park, but it's a precious place to see. But it has very low biodiversity in corals and reef fish compared to the Great Barrier Reef or to the Coral Triangle, which has even more biodiversity than the Great Barrier Reef. And as to the Great Barrier Reef dying or being practically dead or in its terminal stage, you may note that none of those are dead. Dying isn't dead. Practically dead isn't dead. In its terminal stage, Forbes even had in its final terminal stage, as if there are other terminal stages before the final one. And it's all a crock. The Great Barrier Reef is perfectly healthy. It gets damaged by cyclones now and again. And sometimes this starfish comes that eats corals and, eats too many of them. But then there's no corals there and they die or they go down in population. I mean, there's all kinds of cycles in nature. But the Great Barrier Reef is huge and it is healthy. And so is the coral in the Sea of Cortez. In the Coral Triangle. And anybody who wants to see one of the most beautiful things in the world that is underwater, go on an expedition on a boat. There's lots of charters. The Coral Triangle Adventures is one of them. That's the one we use. These people are really biologists, marine biologists, and they know every species of nudibranch and baby fish there is in the whole world. And they will take you on a 10 to 14 day cruise with 16 to 18 people on a beautiful boat where you anchor in beautiful places and you change every day to another place and you see the wonders of the world. There's nothing more beautiful than a coral reef in my estimation. It moves, it's alive, it's colorful. It's just amazing. And this is the warmest ocean in the world too. So it's kind of nice to dive there. There are cool spots, but they're not cool compared to what we think of as cold water. And I hope I can do it once more. I've got other things to do too, and I've seen it twice now extensively, and I've also dived at my home place in Baja a lot. And it's even really interesting because it does have 100 species of fish, but it doesn't have 3,000 like the Coral Triangle does. And it has maybe 5 species of coral compared to 600 in the Coral Triangle. But the truth is the Coral Triangle, the warmest ocean in the world, has the highest biodiversity, and it's basically a sanctuary where the coral range and species has shrunk down to the only place left that is able to support that many species of corals and reef fish because it is the warmest place left on the earth.
Patrick, thank you for joining us on As a Man Thinketh. I appreciate your opinions on these things, and I hope that everything that you had to say helps those out there want to research more and understand a little more about our ecology and how all of these things work together, and why there's a lot of fear out there that they don't have to buy into. And in fact, in my opinion, I think that this fear mongering that's going on is turning people away from caring about our environment. I've always said that people shouldn't you shouldn't have to scare people into caring about their environment. It's something we should all naturally want to do for our environment. But when you start to throw out misinformation, or you start to throw out things that just aren't scientifically accurate, they can't be scientifically accurate, what it ends up doing is it actually turns people off from caring about the environment. And that's the last thing that anybody wants. And so I appreciate your thoughts. I think that it's important that we look at things from a scientific reality. And then from there, people can decide, how they want to move forward. They don't have to worry as much about how every little thing that they're doing is impacting the environment, but they can start thinking about how they want to treat their environment and make it the most productive use of their footprint.